So I'm very pleased to have in the studio this morning Captain Matt Kinnear. He's of the Windsor Reserve Recruiting Group of the Canadian Army Reserves. Welcome to the studio, Matt. It's a pleasure to have you here. I just wonder where we can kick off with things. Maybe you could explain exactly what the Army Reserve is and, how that fits into the broader structure of the Canadian military.
Sure. So thank you so much for having me, first off. A quick intro. So like you introduced, my name is Captain Matt Kinnear. I am the Unit Recruiting Officer here at the Windsor Reserve Recruiting Group, which is part of 31 Canadian Brigade Group. And I'm in charge of gathering and hiring applicants for the Army Reserve in Windsor, Essex, and Chatham-Kent counties. So you asked, what exactly is the Army Reserve? We get this question quite a bit. So the Army Reserve is actually an integrated element of the Canadian Army and the Canadian military in general, with the greatest difference between us and our regular force counterparts being that we are part-time soldiers, meaning that we primarily train one night per week and one weekend per month, as well as consistently participate in domestic operations at home and international operations abroad. So for domestic operations, think more if there's a flood in Eastern Ontario or more recently wildfires. The Army Reserve is often the first source of personnel that are called upon to mitigate disasters. And for international operations abroad, think service members overseas on a named NATO operation. And I think the key takeaway that I really wanted to hammer down from that is we're part-time soldiers, but we live and work in Windsor, Essex, and Chatham-Kent counties. We are members of the community. We have a very long and storied history with this area. We're part of the community too.
Yeah, it sounds like, there's a lot of skill sets that are being learned when you're an Army Reservist and a lot of responsibilities, which kind of brings me to the next question, which is, what are some of the educational and employment opportunities available through being a part-time, doing part-time service in the Army Reserve?
Right, yeah. So we do have some unique employment opportunities and programs for our members. So first, we offer a program called Full-Time Summer Employment. And as it sounds, it's full-time summer employment from the months of May until September to any of our members that want it. We find that this works particularly well with students that are often looking for employment during the summer when not attending class, as well as in transitioning to a very flexible part-time career during the school year. Additionally, to students, we offer and provide education reimbursement that can provide up to $2,000 per year towards school tuition. And I want to emphasize that these programs aren't just catered toward post-secondary students. As a matter of fact, one of our more and most successful programs is our high school paid co-op program, which offers high school students above the age of 16 with the consent of their parent or guardian credits toward their diploma and continue on to be a part-time military career after graduation. So I can tell you from personal experience. So when I was in school and university, I took advantage of these programs, and the tuition reimbursement helped immensely. And I can't tell you how priceless it was to have a full-time job guaranteed to me and every summer as a student. It really just helped me out a lot.
All of that sounds incredibly positive. I guess I've got some background in the military, but I imagine there's some misconceptions about, what it means to be an Army Reserve, especially things like deployments. What are you committing to? What is the level of commitment necessary as someone that might be considering applying and being an Army Reservist?
So you hit a really good point because there are often quite a few misconceptions about the Canadian military and about the Army Reserve in particular. So first and foremost, we are a paid volunteer force. People often have the impression that when you join the military, you sign a dotted line, and the military now controls every aspect of your life. So that's not the case as an Army Reservist. All of your service is completely voluntary. We do not force our members into service they cannot commit to, and we support our members within their civilian careers, and we work to balance their careers with the training we provide. Like I said, this is a part-time career. We typically work, or what we call train, one night per week and one weekend per month. Typically that's 7 to 10 p.m. on a weeknight and Friday evening to Sunday afternoon on our weekend exercises. So training on weeknights is typically done in your local area, so Windsor or Chatham, and weekends are typically done at a Canadian Forces base in Ontario. Now you touched on deployments. So for those who don't know, a deployment is an opportunity and is where a military member will work for extended periods of time away from their home location. This can be anywhere between 3 and 6 months. And much like what I already touched on, this is completely voluntary. Actually, as a reservist, deployments can be quite competitive. We want to have the people who are motivated to go and have people who have the right qualifications to go. So they can be, when it's offered, it can be quite competitive to get into it. Again, it's not this idea that you're dragging somebody and forcing them to serve somewhere that they don't want to or can't commit to. So realistically, we have members in our units in Windsor, Essex, and Chatham that are from a broad range of backgrounds and broad age ranges as well. The only three key requirements that we have to join the Army Reserve are what we call ACE: age, citizenship, and education. So you have to be between the ages of 16 and 56. You have to either be a permanent resident or a citizen of Canada, and you have to have a minimum of a grade 10 education. So I would, if anybody's listening and they're thinking about applying, I would say, don't count yourself out because you think you're too old, too young, or well, as long as you're above 16, or too this or too that. Though, if you can meet those three requirements, you can apply.
Could you tell us about some of the specific occupations that individuals can pursue in the Army Reserve?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 16 different occupations that our applicants can choose from. 5 of which are what we call commissioned officers. So those are applicants who either have a university degree or are pursuing a university degree. The other 11 occupations are what we call non-commissioned member occupations, and those require a minimum of a grade 10 education. So these occupations range from those that are closer to the battle space, closer to combat, such as an infantier, an armored non-commissioned member, infantry officer, or an armored officer, those being the occupations that lead those formations. And they typically use heavy equipment, weapon systems, and vehicles to fight the fight and win the battle. And the other occupations that we offer as well are what we called combat service support, so CSS occupations. So those are occupations that maintain and sustain the battle, both during the battle and during routine maintenance or routine check-ins. Those can be anywhere, but any occupation such as our military truck drivers, or what we call mobile support equipment operators, MSCOPs. So they transport troops, materiel, stores to where they're needed in a battle space or just routine to where they need to go. Material management technicians that maintain stocks, proper stock taking, ensure that the supplies need to get where they getting where they need to go. Pardon me. Cooks, if we typically we are a self-sustaining organization. So if we can cook our own food, we will. Otherwise, we'll provide rations. Vehicle and weapons technicians who either perform routine maintenance on vehicles or weapons, or during a battle when those weapons systems or vehicles go down, they move to repair them right there and right then. On top of this, we have human resources and financial services administrators who ensure that our members are aware and are receiving the proper compensation, pay, and benefits that makes everybody happy and makes everybody motivated.
Yeah.
And I think the key point I want to take away from this, it's another misconception, is that oftentimes you think Army, military, well, your job is a soldier and that's it. But realistically, this is just a snippet of what the Canadian Forces in general offers. But in the local area, we have a very broad range of occupations that we choose from, and every single one of them is very important to the greater mission as a team. And I think oftentimes people, when they talk about the military, they say, I really enjoyed that my work felt meaningful and that I felt I was a greater part of a team. So there's not one that's better than the other. They're all equally important to the fight.
It's like a self-sustaining community almost. Everybody's got these different roles to keep the whole machine running.
Exactly.
I guess a parallel question to that is new recruits. If I was thinking about going into the reserves, what's exactly involved in the training process and how does that prepare them for their roles?
Sure. So as I just mentioned, we have a broad range of occupations, but we all train as soldiers first. So whether you're a cook or an infantier or a vehicle technician, you receive the initial same basic training, what we call BMQ, Basic Military Qualification. So this training trains applicants to be self-disciplined, you'll learn how to march and discipline yourselves in groups. You'll learn how to work in larger groups as well as smaller groups. You'll learn how to lead as well as to follow. Both are equally very important. You'll learn to train out on a weapon system such as the C7 rifle. You'll learn to live outside, basic survival skills and fieldcraft. Every one of our members on basic training receives first aid training. We'll get that qualification. And on a more personal level, people always cite the fact that you receive excellent resilience training. I can speak personally as well to this, that when you come back from that basic training, it can be challenging and a culture shock, but you will come back a more self-confident, a more resilient, more resilient person. You'll learn that you can thrive and survive in adverse conditions. And I don't think I can understate that. So that's your basic training. That's what everybody does. Your basic training can be done as a reservist. We have the option to do this on weekends. So that's taken place over 11 weekends spread out about 5 or 6 months. Or the option is there to do it full time for 4 weeks or a month all in one go. That's Monday to Friday versus weekends. Your weekends would typically be just like the exercises, 7 p.m. on a Friday to around 4 or 5 on a Sunday, and it would be done locally. Now, after your basic training is done, I listed all those occupations. You move into an occupation training, which is a bit more specific and a bit more professionalized than the basic training is. Not that the basic training is unprofessional. The basic training we have the option to do that on weekends, but your occupation training almost always will have to be done full time, and it's usually about 5 to 7 weeks long at a Canadian Forces training facility. And you might say, Matt, you're just saying this is a part-time job. Why are you saying I have to take 5 to 7 weeks off to do this occupation training? And the answer to that is we're a professional organization. We offer professional qualifications. And when we need to augment our regular or move into with our regular force counterparts, we need to have relatively the same status of training. So if a Army reservist is called up to a domestic operation and needs to help out the community with flooding, or you're on an international operation, you need to have relatively that same skill set and same qualifications. That's why it needs to be done full time. Mm-hmm. But overall, all of this training is incredibly professional. It's going to offer, just as basic training, I said, is going to offer professionalism, is going to offer resiliency training, and is going to make you a better person in general and allow you to achieve goals that you never thought you could. Yeah,
it sounds absolutely fantastic. And as well as building character and resilience and all of those things, you're actually getting a very good professional training. Now, a couple of times you mentioned, Matt, from your own experience. I just wondered if you wouldn't mind expanding on that a little bit and just telling us something about your own personal experience in the Canadian Forces and how it shaped your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up with a military family. My father was in the regular force, Air Force, as a pilot for 32 years, and we moved around quite a bit. I lived outside of Canada for 8 years. We lived in the United States for 5 and in Germany for 3.5. So I knew that whatever career I chose, I knew that I was going to have this in the background. I knew I could rely on this as a career. And when I turned 16 and 18, I didn't initially go right into the recruiting office. I went to university, and I was introduced to the Army Reserve by a friend who had gone into the local Army Reserve unit and said, hey, you might try this and look at these opportunities. So like I mentioned earlier, I really liked the fact that they would pay for $2,000 a year in my tuition. And having a job every summer, and this is back in 2016, having a job every summer, the job security was just priceless. It was just awesome. I started as a non-commissioned member, actually. And as I progressed in my life and my career, I realized I really liked the work. I did a couple contracts with the military and did a bit more full-time work and realized I think this is something I want to pursue further. So I commissioned as an officer because I already had my degree. And once I completed my officer training, and I was employed at my home unit briefly, my commanding officer, my CO, came up to me and said, Matt, there's an opportunity to deploy to the Middle East. Would you like to do this? And I jumped at it. This is a dream for me. So I competed for the position. I had the right qualifications. I got the position, and then for 6.5 months, I deployed to the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And that was an excellent experience. I met amazing people from different countries. I had an excellent team of other Canadians working with me. And I really got an appreciation for what the flag on my shoulder meant, because anywhere we went, people would come up to us and say, oh, my cousin lives in Canada. I love Canada. My brother studies in Edmonton. My sister lives in Ottawa. Like, what a great country you have. and got a real perspective on certain things that we might take for granted in Canada that other people just don't have, and how much of an appreciation they have for us being there. So coming back, I had a real appreciation for the flag on my shoulder as well as the uniform that I wore. So that was a really wonderful experience.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, the rights and freedoms that we do often, we take them for granted. So just on a practical front, for anyone listening today and they might be interested in learning more, applying, what steps should they take to get involved with Windsor's Army Reserve specifically?
Sure. So if you're interested, you can apply right away. You can go on our website at forces.ca and select the part-time option. It'll direct you to our local recruiting group, and we'll take it from there and we'll get you started with the process. Or if you're interested but would like to know more, you can schedule a meeting with myself or one of our staff members, either by calling us at 519-254-2535, extension 4512, or emailing us at WindsorChathamRec, that's Windsor, all one word, WindsorChatham, REC at forces.gc.ca. Or you can stop by our office at 4007 Sandwich Street and just walk in. We welcome walk-in appointments, and we'll chat your ear off. The opportunity is there.
That's great. Okay, so I want to bring things back full circle. I know we've touched on this before. CKBG Radio, we kind of see ourselves as a beacon of the community, connecting the community, giving people a voice. How do you see Windsor's Army Reserve contributing to the local community, and why is it important for young people to consider joining through that perspective?
Right. So I think this ties into a bit of what I mentioned earlier about members of this military community who are part-time also have civilian careers in this community. We're a link for everybody in the community to something that is often, I think, very vague and very other, which is the Canadian military and the community of veterans. We have members that are still serving, that have served in campaigns and operations overseas for Canada, who continue to serve. We have veterans in this community that have served with this local community. We live and work and are members of this community, and I think that's a pretty interesting fact that people don't know about. And I think oftentimes, through no fault of their own, people don't realize that we're here and we're members of your community as well. And I think that first and foremost, it's an important link to that other and that entity of Canada. Now, in terms of young people, I can only speak from experience. And what I can tell you from my own experience is the military truly, and the training that I've received and the experience I've had with the military has shaped me into the person that I am today. I don't say that to be cliche. I say that because I am a more resilient, I am a more self-confident person, and I know that I can work in adverse conditions and stressful scenarios, and that is directly attributed to the training. I think that those traits and those qualities are really important in today's day and age, and I think they can be quite coveted at points, and the military will absolutely offer that, on top of all the education and all the job security and benefits that I've already mentioned. So I think for young people, it's something to consider for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. From all that you've told us, and thank you for filling in all of those blanks and kind of painting a very clear picture about what it is that the Army Reserve does and the kinds of things that it can lead to in both in personal growth and building your own skill set and a career, etc., etc. It's fantastic that you have this role in our community. And I'm so pleased to have you in the studio and explain all of that. So thank you, Matt. Thank you for coming to CKBG. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.